She had always heard whispers in town about the cowboy no one dared to touch, a man who rode through the dusty streets with a shadow that seemed heavier than the sun itself, his hat always low and his eyes like steel that never gave anything away. But what struck her most when she first saw him was not his silence, nor the scar that carved across his jaw, but the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. And when fate brought her into his path, she discovered that beneath the hardened shell was a man who had built walls not just around his heart but around his entire soul, walls so high no one had dared to climb, until she, against all reason, fell in love with him. People called her reckless when she said yes to his quiet proposal under a starlit sky, with nothing but the sound of crickets and the promise of forever between them, because they all knew the legends about him, stories of gunfights, betrayal, and scars no one could see. But she saw something else. She saw the way his hands trembled when he brushed a strand of hair from her face, the way his voice softened when he whispered her name, and she believed love was strong enough to heal any wound. Yet there was one thing about him that haunted her from the very first day of their marriage. He never took his shirt off, not in the scorching heat of summer, not even in the intimacy of their home when the world outside was asleep. And though she tried not to question it, her heart ached with the mystery, because love thrives on truth, and she feared there was a part of him forever hidden from her. At first she convinced herself it was shyness, or perhaps the shame of scars from battles long past. But as days turned into months, she began to notice the way he would flinch if her hands lingered too close to the buttons of his shirt, the way his eyes would harden, not with anger but with pain, as though he carried a burden too heavy to share. And she knew that no matter how much he loved her, there was a secret buried in his flesh, a truth that threatened to tear them apart. The turning point came one stormy night when the thunder rattled their cabin in lightning, split the sky, and she woke to find him tossing in his sleep, his shirt damp with sweat, his voice breaking as he whispered names she did not know. And when she reached for him, her fingers brushed against something under his shirt, something not natural, something that felt like raised, burned skin. And before she could pull away, his eyes snapped open, filled with a torment so raw it stole her breath. He tried to turn from her, to bury his shame in silence as he had always done. But she would not let him, not when love demanded truth, and with tears in her eyes she begged him to let her see, to share the burden he had carried alone for so long. Fire set long ago by men who hated him for the blood that ran in his veins, men who tied him down and left him to burn because he stood for what they feared. A fire he survived but never forgot, a fire that stole not just his skin but the innocence of his youth. She gasped, not from horror but from heartbreak, because now she understood why he walked through life with a shadow, why no one dared to touch him, why he had built his walls so high. And she gathered him in her arms as though her embrace could shield him from the memories that haunted him still. He confessed that he had hidden it not out of mistrust but out of fear, fear that even she would recoil from the ugliness carved into his body, fear that love could not survive the sight of what cruelty had done. And yet as her tears mingled with his, she kissed every scar as though it were holy, whispering that love was not about what the world saw but about what the heart knew. And her heart knew that he was worth every scar, every shadow, every painful memory, because his soul was beautiful, even if his flesh bore the mark of hell. From that night on, he no longer hid from her, no longer cloaked himself in shame, because her love had given him the courage to stand unashamed. And though the world still looked at him with fear and whispered his name with caution, she held his hand proudly, for she knew that the cowboy nobody dared to touch was not a man to be feared but a man to be cherished, a man who had walked through fire and survived, a man whose scars were proof not of weakness but of strength. And in loving him, she too became stronger, because love is not about the perfection of flesh but the endurance of spirit. And together they built a life not defined by what was lost but by what was found, a love that turned scars into symbols of survival, silence into trust, and loneliness into a forever worth fighting for. Dear listener, if this story touched your heart, if it made you believe that even the most broken souls can find healing in love, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because here you will always find stories that inspire, that move, and that remind you of the power of hope, forgiveness, and love. Your support helps us bring more powerful tales like this one to life. So hit that button, and join us on this journey of unforgettable storytelling.